Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric. I am the Fraudiophile. This is the channel where we talk about records, music, stereo equipment, and all sorts of stuff in between. So today I wanted to do a video calling Late to the Party. So these are about bands that I did not listen to when they were in their heyday or when they got started. I would say if they're an older band, I didn't get into them until much later, or if they're a newer band, it was many years before I started getting into them. So let's get started. So the first one, and I've mentioned this in some of my videos before, is a band that I could not stand when I was younger. When I was a teenager, hearing them on the radio, did not like them whatsoever. Now I love this band, one of my favorites, have their entire discography on vinyl, listen to them all the time, and that is the great Steely Dan. So this here is Asia, which is my favorite of all of their albums. Just the way the music's put together, the recording quality, everything sounds so good. Everything is so meticulous about their music, and love the way that they bring in different musicians to really figure out what their vision was. Fagen and Becker, just phenomenal, genius songwriters, and really knew how to produce an album. Again, I hated this band when I was a kid. Now it's one of the bands top 5 bands I listen to most often. So I was definitely late to the party with old Steely Dan. Another one. Now this one is another band that was in its heyday, or artist that was in his heyday back in the 70s. It's David Bowie. So obviously this is Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Growing up as a kid in the 80s, we didn't listen to a lot of Bowie in our house. Watching MTV, the one that stuck out the most to me was Let's Dance. And then when he did Dancing in the Streets with Mick Jagger. Didn't realize how creative Bowie was back in the 70s, and really didn't start listening to Bowie that much until he passed away. My favorite radio station I listen to here is called The Current, based out of Minneapolis. And when Bowie died, they basically went into Bowie mode for about 3 days, and that was about all they played. And was just blown away with his catalog and started exploring it more and more after he passed. I'm really glad I did. Ziggy Stardust, one of my favorite albums. Even my daughter, this is one of her favorites too, even though she's only 13 years old. So, late to the party with old Mr. Bowie. Staying in that same era, and actually before, and being a Minnesota resident, it's amazing, a couple of these here that I was late to the party with. Probably the most so being Bob Dylan. As a kid, Dylan was everywhere. My parents listened to Dylan. I had a lot of friends that listened to Dylan, but I never really dove in. I knew, the songs that were on his greatest hits. Everybody Must Get Stoned, Like a Rolling Stone, things like that. Didn't realize how deep and massive and how great his catalog is, especially probably about the first 6 or 7 albums of his. Highway 61, Blood on the Tracks, Blonde on Blonde would be my favorite albums of Bob's. Obviously, there's a lot of other people who are late to the party with Bob and are really discovering him now with the Timothée Chalamet movie that came out. So glad I'm not the only one that was late to the Bob party. Sticking with that theme of Minnesota artists that I was late to the party on, the Replacements. I won't go too deep into the Replacements. I did a whole video on how they're one of the bands that I love. Pleased to Meet Me, great album. This is really where they started to me, have a little bit of a departure from that early sort of punk hardcore, and when Westerberg's really got into his bag in songwriting. I think the most I listened to the Replacements, other than when I was given a CD by a guy I worked with, was after Singles came out, when Paul Westerberg had a couple of solo songs on there. And that was when I really started reaching in to see, who is this band? Listened to them quite a bit in the mid to late 90s, backed off, didn't listen to them a whole lot, but in the last probably 5 years or so, this is one of my most played bands. I will reference The Current a couple of times on here, the great radio station. By the way, you can stream that online at thecurrent.org. It's fantastic. Support your public radio, especially now when everything in the world is getting defunded, including public radio, public television. Go support that channel. Another one where I heard their music really for the first time on there was The National. Don't have a whole lot of this on vinyl. Streamed a lot of it over the years. But another band that has been around for, 15-ish years or so. Really started listening to them more and more in the last 3 years. Love Matt Berenger's voice. Love the songwriting. I think the Dessner brothers are geniuses. I think really when I started getting more into this, I'm a huge Bon Iver fan, and always have been. But the more that Justin Vernon has worked with Aaron Dessner, and hearing about the collaborations has really made me dive deeper into the Nationals catalog. One more that I would call a semi-local band, and again referencing the current that got me into this band, is the Hold Steady. This is the band that I've probably seen the most live of any band in the last 15 years or so. Another one I heard a song. I heard the song "Your Little Hood Rat Friend" on the current. Pulled Shazam out on my phone and said, "What is this?" Absolutely fell in love with it. Dove into their catalog, and they've been one of my favorite bands ever since. Live records, or I'm sorry, their live shows are absolutely my favorite thing to go to. There's, as Craig always says, there's so much joy in what we do here, and you get to be a part of that when you're in the crowd. And looking forward to this, actually going to see these guys live again here in May at First Avenue in Minneapolis. I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, I think their first album came out 2003. I really didn't start getting into them until about 2013 or so. So a little bit like 10 years behind with this band. But glad I discovered them and listen to them all the time today. Next up is another band that I've listened to a little bit off and on since the first album, Hot Fuss, came out, but that's the Killers. This is a band that I've started listening to more and more thanks to my wife. Because we have gone and seen the Hold Steady and Jason Isbell and a lot of the same bands over and over again, my wife got in my case and said, "Hey, take me to a concert that's not the Hold Steady or Jason Isbell." Turns out the Killers were playing at XL Energy Center in St. Paul. Went up there, saw them. Could not believe, first and foremost, how great of a show they put on. But second, not being much of a Killers fan, other than knowing, Mr. Brightside and some of the huge songs, I knew almost every song that they played in that show. They played for 2 hours and blew me away how much I knew. So I really started digging more and more into their back catalog. Hot Fuss, one of my favorites, Sam's Town. This album is fantastic too. Even some of the newer stuff they're making, it's getting a little more electronica based. Rather than straight ahead guitar rock, but I still really like it. Wish I would have been a little more into them when they first came out. Another one, mentioning Jason Isbell and how I got into him, got me back into the Drive-By Truckers. Now, this band was actually one of my brother's favorite bands. He had been telling me for years I need to listen to these guys, but never really did. Started listening to Isbell right after Southeastern came out, so I want to say that was 2013 as well. Didn't really know anything about Isbell. Listened to a podcast with Mark Maron, WTF, where he interviewed Isbell in a hotel room after his show, and then he played Elephant on an acoustic guitar, and I was just absolutely blown away by that song. It was the first time I heard it, listened to Southeastern a million times, and then started digging in more into the back catalog, including the Truckers. I've been lucky enough to go and see them a couple times up in the Twin Cities as well. Jason Isbell is no longer with them. Patterson Hood, Mike Cooley, really the driving forces of this band, have been for a long time. But they're still touring. They're still putting out great music all the time. Dirty South is probably my favorite. Decoration Day would probably be my second favorite album of theirs. But another band that found a reason to go back and listen to them, and really glad that I did. Speaking of Isbell and the Drive-By Truckers, he actually has a song in there called Danko Manual. At first I saw it, I'm like, what is that? No idea what that is. Oh, it's Rick Danko and Richard Manuel from the band. Growing up, one of the constants in our house, I've got it back here somewhere, is the Big Chill soundtrack. It's one of my mom's favorites. She used to listen to that cassette like crazy. In the car everywhere we went, and one of the songs on there is The Wait by the band. So knew that. Didn't really know a whole lot about them. Was in a hotel in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, actually Justin Vernon from Bon Iver, a hotel that he owns, where they had record players in each room. and they had a big vinyl collection out at the front desk where you'd check it out just like a library checking out a book. Grabbed some albums, saw this, didn't even know what it was. Just thought the cover was super interesting. Grabbed it, took it back to the room, like, oh, this is music from Big Pink. Wife and I listened to this and was just blown away. And love the band now. Listen to this. Got the Brown album. Watched The Last Waltz pretty much every Thanksgiving, thanks to the recommendation of the great Stephen Hayden. But yeah, another fantastic band that I wish I would have listened to a little bit earlier. And last but not least, so that's 10. This one is kind of a bonus. I'm going to call this a band that I really got into, but then got away from. And now I'm back majorly. It's Wilco. When AM came out in, I believe it was 1995, somewhere in that range, Son Volt, after Uncle Tupelo broke up, which was Jeff Tweedy's first band with Jay Farrar, they split into two bands. Farrar formed Son Volt, which I absolutely loved, and then Tweedy formed Wilco. I had AM, I had Being There on CD, loved them, but then just kind of stepped away. Heard a ton about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and how it was a classic album now, and just how they've become sort of media darlings after this came out. Probably right now, the two bands I listen to the most would be REM and Wilco, both bands that I would put on that same list of used to like, didn't listen to them for a while, and now they're probably my two most listened to bands currently. Obviously, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot is great. I've been listening to A Ghost Is Born a ton. The reason I got back into that album, actually watching The Bear on TV. If anybody's ever seen that on Hulu, it's fantastic. And do a lot of great needle drops from a ton of wonderful bands, but they play a lot of Wilco on there. Spider's Kid Smoke off of A Ghost Is Born right now is probably the song I'm listening to the most, to the chagrin of everybody else in the house. But yeah, those are the bands that anti-hipster, right? The hipsters always say, I liked that band before they were cool. These are the bands that I'm the exact opposite on. So thanks for watching. If you have bands that you took a while to get into, please mention those down in the comments. Last but not least, I'd also like to throw a little shout out here to Greg at 3 Dimensions of Music. I'm going to link to his channel in the description below. Greg was nice enough on his channel, after watching my video about the Dark Side of the Moon that I'm giving away, to actually make a video highlighting my channel and push a lot of his subscribers over here. A lot of them commented, and it just felt great. This is really what the vinyl community is all about. Highlighting other people's channels, pushing people from your channel over there. So if you're a subscriber of mine and you're not of Greg's, again, go to the link in the description. That'll take you out to his channel. Check him out. He doesn't make a ton of videos. I wish he would make more, but yeah, that's really what this is all about community. So leave a comment, subscribe. I'm on my way to 500 subscribers, not quite there yet. Also check out my video on my Pink Floyd collection and enter my Dark Side of the Moon giveaway if you see this video before April 1st, 2025. All right, have a great one. Have a great one, everybody.